Okay, so let's actually make sure our app is running. We're going to say npm run start dev. So again, this is going to be watching our Webpack, and it's going to be running our server, although we're probably not going to make too many changes to our server, if any, really. Let's take a look at our index file. Okay? We're actually going to do something a little bit different here. What we're going to end up doing is that instead of importing render from the React DOM, actually when we use our router, I'm not even sure we end up needing the React DOM. We're going to end up importing our routes from /routes. Okay? So the import is basically going to look for this file, and we're going to want to do something like routes. Okay? So again, this is going to end up basically our routes are going to be in the form of a router. We're going to end up needing React Router. Of course, if we ended up just doing this is going to break because it's not going to end up finding this file. So let's go over here and let's start this process off. We're going to say routes.js. And let's look and let's figure out what we need from here. So we're going to do, let's do an npm install. Take care, Chris. You too. So we're going to do an npm install of React Router. Let's save it. So let's start with something fairly simplistic here. We're always going to end up needing React for these components. React from React. And we'll start by just bringing in our router from React Router. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a const, which is going to be our routes. And this is just going to basically be a function that returns some JSX, because that's basically what we are going to be mounting on to our root. And if we just went over here and we said router, right, we've brought the router in from React Router, and we could say export default routes. This should end up building. And if we go over here, we try to run it, we're finding out that render is not defined, and that is actually my mistake here. We do need render. Silly, I don't know what I was thinking. So here we'll put this back. Import render from React DOM. And if we run this, so we end up getting an error here. And the error is that it can't quite figure out where to go. It can't end up getting its current location. So let's see if we can sort of tease this out to get this to work. We're going to go back up to our routes. And let's actually set up in our router a route. So we're going to have a route. A route is going to consist of a path, and it also needs to have a component. So the components end up getting brought in by doing something like, we're going to say import layout from, and usually these are put in a directory called components layout. Again, that file doesn't exist. But if we went over here and we ended up doing that, right, route path / component, which is going to be our layout. Yes, thank you. So we'll go over here. This is going to be a valid property to send to our router. I could save this. Let's actually go over here, and we're going to say components. And I'm going to say layout.js. Again, there's no templates. The templates are your JSX. Again, import React from React, constant layout equals, And I'm just putting these here just because I want to put stuff on multiple lines, but it's just going to basically, when you see this with ES6, it's still considered a one-liner. So it basically will return this. It's going to be a huge React create element, although not that huge at this point. But if we went over here and I could say div, hello, div, try that. Again, export, default, layout. We go and we do that. Okay, still getting this error. Route is not defined. Actually, it's a different error. Let's go over here. And if we want to put a route here, everything's got to be defined. That's coming in here. I want to bring in router. I also want to bring in a route. Now, the error that I get here, so I'm still getting current location. What the problem is that a router needs to have a history. There's a couple of different histories you could use. The one we're going to use is the more simplistic one just because I don't want a hard reload to end up breaking things for us. So we're going to use hash history, and we're going to bring that in over here. And that should make this error go away. And now we have this router that's loading this component. Now, if we just sort of think about this a little bit, our layout's going to want to have our navigation files in it. So let's say it's going to look more like this. Again, we've got to do class name because we're using JSX, and this is really going to end up getting rendered as JavaScript. Class is reserved keyword, and we'll do a UL class name equals nav tabs. And I'm going to have two of these here. And one of the things that I could do, I could just put an A here, href equals slash, or I guess in our case it would be # or something like that, home, A. And if I just ended up doing that, let's take a look. Right, that'll end up rendering, and I could go over here and say, well, I'm going to put in users over here. But really, what I want to be able to do is take advantage of some of the things that end up coming with React. So there's two things that I want to do. I want to go over here to my routes. Because, again, this is just going to be the layout. So really what it ends up coming into play here is that nested below slash, we're going to have some other routes. And one of the things you could do is you could specify, hey, look, even if there's nothing, even if there's, you're just at the slash, we still want something to load, right? We want our home page to end up loading by default. So one of the things that we could do here, so we could go over here and say index route and specify within this other route, the index route is going to have a component of home. Now, if I just went and I did that, first of all, I'm going to need to import home from /components home. And if I was to go over here, I would want to add home.js. And again, if I went in here, I would want to say import React from React. And this is going to be constant home. And just to keep it simple, let's say div class name as well. Welcome home. And we'll go over here and we'll say export default home. And now if we end up putting this here, if I didn't end up missing anything, if we go over to our routes, so now we've specified that home is going to be the index route underneath this path. If we go over here, we shouldn't end up seeing any changes, but we're not going to see our home page. So one of the things that happens here is that when this route ends up getting rendered, okay, what you want to specify is, hey, look, there's going to be some child properties that will end up getting passed through here. So this might seem a little bit strange, but what happens with the layout is that there's properties that are going to end up getting passed in here by default. Since we have this main route, okay, there's what we're specifying is that underneath this, if no route is specified, we want the home route coming in here. The home route or any other route comes in as children. So one of the things that you could do is that we could do something like this and say props and go over here and say props.children. So an object gets passed here. That object, it'll have things on it. You could access the router to find out what route ended up getting selected. If we end up running this, we'll end up seeing our home page. Okay? Again, if you wanted to go and take a look and see what else ended up getting passed here, with this syntax, since we're just returning JSX, it's a little bit tricky here, but you can actually make things a little bit nicer here by specifying, hey, look, there's an object that's getting passed here, and you could basically specify, hey, look, the only thing I'm interested in, or one of the things that I'm interested in, are the children, in which case you could just go over here and specify children. So when you have this route specified, you have basically a child route that's coming in here as children, right? Because the route is nested inside of here, our index route. And now if we go over here, we'll end up getting that same result. Now let's just do one more thing. When we go to our layout, instead of putting this link in here, let's actually import a helper that comes with React Router. And this will allow us to say link to /home. So again, same thing here. I mean, if you ended up looking at that link component, you'd find out that its children are the text, which will it'll end up rendering inside of an A tag. And so this should give us really those same results. We get a weird message here because it says this page is already on the stack. Why do you want to put it on the stack again? But let's just pretend, and we don't have it yet, that we also have a link to users. We'll specify users. And if we run that and we were to go and click this link, we'd get an error message that says this is not a valid route. So let's actually set up that route. What we'll end up doing over here is if we go back to our routes, import users from /components users. This is going to be basically a list of all of our users on our site. And here we'll specify this is a route. The path is going to be /users. The component is going to be users. And now the only thing left to do is to go over here and say users.js. And we'll do import React from React. And we'll go over here and we'll say constant users equals. And here we're just going to return a div, say class name as well. And we'll go over here and I'll just put in users. And I'll say export default users. So if I end up doing that, this should end up rebundling. Now if I go over here, I should see users and I should see home. And we could actually make it so that these links are pre-selected. One of the things that ends up getting passed in here as a property is going to be the router. And I could deal with that router property and sort of pre-select which one I want pre-selected. But we'll sort of leave that off at the moment. So again, that's going to sort of set us up For our router, again, the main thing to sort of notice here is your router is basically going to specify paths and components, and you have the ability to nest your components. So if you had another route for some other entity in your application, you could end up putting it here, and you would have to just have some component that could handle that route. Okay, that's going to do it for this one.